on behalf of my senior pastor, the Reverend Michael A. Warren Jr., I'd like to just welcome you to here tonight. So thank you so much for being here. I'm also part of the FCBC Community Development Corporation, and our Community Development Corporation is pleased to be partnering with, the entity that is having this particular event, and especially everyone on this panel practically in terms of their organization. So, welcome. I think this is going to be a great opportunity for us to share what we're going to hear tonight, and I'm now just going to turn it over to the panel.
Thanks so much, Deacon Powell, for being such a great host and partnering with us on the conversation. Thanks for everybody for coming. I'll just mention my name is Adam Ganser. I'm the Executive Director of New Yorkers for Parks. We've been around for over 100 years, and our work really focuses on advocacy, research, and programming, solely looking at New York City's parks and open spaces. We started something called the Play Fair Coalition, which is now about 400 organizations across the city, all advocating for more resources for our city's parks, and that's really focused on the annual budget, how the city is able to or not able to operate and maintain the city's parks. But we also focus on neighborhoods in the city that are where there's a lot of activity and advocacy around their own communities and parks and open spaces. We do a research report on the entire city every 5 years that looks at all 59 community boards. And what we've done this year is looked at 5 different community boards where there are big opportunities and a lot of really strong advocates and a real deep need for increased access to parks and open space, which is why this panel is happening. And so I'm really grateful that everybody has come here to join the conversation. I think first thing I'd love to do is to have each of you give a real quick introduction to yourself, and then we can start the conversation. So we can start with you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? I'm not sure if it's on. I don't know if it's on. All right.
So you want to just use it?
Oh, okay. Good evening, everyone. Hi, my name is Savona Bailey-McClain. I'm the Executive Director and Chief Curator of the West Harlem Art Fund. Our organization is 27 years old, and we focus primarily on public art. And we've done that across the city. But we also have to deal with land management, because land management and public art goes hand to hand. And we launched last year a very large-scale sculpture exhibition, Harlem Sculpture Gardens, which will open again this year on Friday. And so we started a resiliency coalition because we noticed climate impacts in our parks, so we could help remedy some of those issues as we're trying to place sculptures in them. And I look forward to talking further with everyone here on the panel. Thank you.
Greg, do you want to go next?
So, good evening, everyone. My name is Gregory Baggett. I'm the founder. Can you hear me?
We might need to pass the mic. Here.
Again, my name is Gregory Baggett, and I'm the founder of the A. Philip Randolph Square Neighborhood Alliance. Our organization began as a loosely organized group of volunteers concerned mostly around public safety and quality of life issues at this park right across the street here, just north of the church. And over the decades that we have been organizing, we have grown into an organization that is focused around community planning, and we're currently working on developing a public realm strategy to develop a green district for a section of Central Harlem that I hope to talk about a little bit later, so thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lourdes, and I am a member of Community Board 10. I also sit on the Parks and Recreation Committee, where we really concentrate on development and curating public spaces and parks for our district.
Hi, I'm Tamar Renaud with the Trust for Public Land. We're a 50-year-old national organization that believes that everybody should have access to the outdoors. And we were born in San Francisco from the Nature Conservancy. There were three members who used to work there, and one of them went ahead and bought a plot of land under the bridge, the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge. And when he told his boss what he had done, his boss asked him, well, what kind of wildlife are you protecting? Because there was no endangered species on that plot of land. And he said, I'm protecting the human species because they also need access to the outdoors. So much more locally in New York, what we do is we transform playgrounds that look like parking lots that are blacktop covered into green, shade-producing playgrounds that are very colorful and fun for kids to play in, and that can also absorb up to 1 million gallons of water a year, so that there's less flooding into the streets and combined sewer outflow, or otherwise known as sewage water, going into our rivers. We're also working on the Queensway in Queens, which is like an elevated walking and biking path, and the Long Island Greenway, which is a walking and biking path from Manhattan all the way into Long Island, all the way to Montauk. So we can talk more. We also do a lot around thinking about the benefits of green spaces on the economic side, on the health side, on the mental health side, and how park spaces can be used to reconnect communities.
That's great. Lourdes, I'd love to start with you because our conversation started with CB10 about a year and a half ago. And maybe you can kind of give us some highlights of what the Parks Committee is thinking generally and the situation here in Central Harlem.
So the Parks Committee pretty much concentrates on safety within our parks, basically to make sure that there's equity and advocate for each district and each community within our district so that we can secure that there's safe space for our children, there's safe space for our seniors, there's safe space for our community. And so what we talk about at our parks is that how can we better improve our district whereby we have more green space for our community, because more green space means healthier for all of us in the community. And so we're concentrating on that and being able to develop some of the areas that are underdeveloped within our district so that we can enjoy the outdoor space that other communities absolutely enjoy, and we have not been able to do that here.
One of the things that came up in those conversations was the idea of a Parks Master Plan. Is that still something that the Community Board is looking to have happen with the Parks Department?
Absolutely, we're still looking at that. It's also currently being developed. We do have a new chair who's looking at it as well, and so he's bringing it to the committee so that we can all weigh in as to what our thoughts would be and what we would like to see within our district.
That's right. Tamara, a lot of the work that you discussed is around projects, but I know you guys do a fair amount of research on the value of parks and open space. Is that something you can talk a little bit about?
Sure. Maybe we can just get a raise of hands of people who spent a lot of time in a park or green space during COVID. Okay, so almost everybody. And maybe if we could just get a shout out for how did you feel, what were some of the benefits that you felt in so you mentioned fresh air and you mentioned volunteer work.
Yeah.
One of the things that we study is how parks can create a common ground for people. And a couple, let me retract a little. A couple of years ago, the Surgeon General put out a report on loneliness. And loneliness is associated with higher blood pressure, worse cardiac outcomes, poor sleep, obesity rates, and all sorts of bad health outcomes. And one of the things that we know is when people go to parks, they often go with someone else, whether it's to meet someone for a class that they're taking in a park, whether it is to go for a walk in the park with a friend, or to go play soccer. That it's often a place to come together. And for those of you who are involved in community boards or in other kinds of park creation projects, you know that it can bring people together that don't know each other and that have never met before and had no reason to meet were it not for this opportunity to be part of a park's creation. And so we're really looking at what are some of the benefits that parks bring. We also look at health benefits. When people go outdoors, they're exercising. One of the closest links between spending time outside and in nature and health benefits is that you're moving around and your heart is raising its number of beats per minute. And that's actually very good for your overall health. For those of you who spent time during COVID outside, perhaps you felt a certain sense of relief or calm or sort of a reduction in your stress levels, cortisol levels. There's also research that shows that hearing a bird sing can actually have very calming effects. It's one of the most calming sounds that exists out there. And so for those of us who are living here, surrounded by cars and other loud noises, having some peace and quiet in a park can really be quite transformative. We also do a lot of research on economics, the economic benefits of parks. We know that just in New York City, the park system is saving the city $1 billion in saved healthcare costs, $2 billion in stormwater management, and is bringing the city $101 billion extra dollars in real estate values from taxes. So not only are parks good for our health and our mental health and reducing our loneliness, but they're also an economic stronghold of our city.
Yeah, not to mention the many jobs that they support, green jobs in the workforce, the unionized workforce, which is so important. It's a good transition, Gregory, to your project and what you're trying to do, both with the square and beyond that. Can you dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, well, first I want to just give a shout out to the Chief of Staff of the Borough Commissioner's Office, Steve Simon, who's in the audience, who really championed our project over here at April at Randolph Square. I mean, our project initially started as a beautification project. We were advocating for something like $250,000 to do more planting in the area and to stimulate some programming in order to deal with some of the public health and public safety hazards. And ultimately, our project ballooned to a $3 million expansion project. And now it's a $16 million reconstruction of the entire space that is rather ambitious. And quite frankly, the scope of the project was more expansive than the vision around our organizing. But the project compelled us to begin to think about two things. One, the continued and ongoing maintenance of the renovated site, because oftentimes public investment is spent on projects that no sooner than they're finished begin a period of decline, and a new generation of people pop up to do and repeat the same work that we're doing now. So we wanted to think about long-term maintenance and stewardship of the site, but we also wanted to think about how can we expand this initiative to other areas within our district. That is to say, expand the amount of green that's happening at this corner to other corners within our catchment area. And we landed on an idea that was introduced many years ago by Alexander Garvin to transform St. Nicholas Avenue into a green district. And there's some pictures up there that's floating around with that project. It's a very, I mean, the project is at this point a dream, but it's manageable in a world where we are shifting away from thinking about, first of all, thinking about parks and transportation as separate spheres, and also a world where the automobile and the automobile industry doesn't monopolize the decisions around planning. So in addition to beginning to work around visioning for what we're calling Harlem Lane, which would be sort of a 15-block green district stretching from 110 up to 124th Street, which we hope would tap into all of the great work that's being done along Central Park North. So what we are doing in addition to envisioning that project is working on a more comprehensive plan to find mechanisms to expand green space within Community District 10, a district that is actually surrounded by green space, both north, west, east, and south. And we've identified 10 approaches to expanding green space, and we look forward to introducing that plan at other future meetings within the community.
I'm wondering if, when you and Tamar were taking a walk, if you had any chance to talk about linear parks, because you're sort of separately working on them. Was that part of your conversation at all?
I thought we had a really great conversation. I think what was the most pressing issue was less about parks per se, and more about how do we tap into the consciousness of a community where parks and green advocacy does not generally resonate. A community where for years was a low priority in many aspects, and the question for me is not so much to focus on the past and what didn't happen in the past, but to figure out how do we find ways to take advantage of the current set of opportunities that exist, and how can we move people into this space without necessarily it being framed as either public health, public safety, or quality of life.
One of the things you've talked about is you kind of explicitly saying it's not a park, it's not this, it's many different things. And Savona, for you, what I found interesting about our first conversation was you work in the cultural sector, but somehow a lot of your work has now become environmentally focused and plant focused, and maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Well, as I mentioned before, land management is a part of public art. You have to think about installations, de-installations, what's your environment, are there any challenges that you have to face, trees, different types of plants, or gallery. They felt intimidated. People still feel intimidated today. They worry about, are they saying the right thing? Are they understanding it the way the artist, wanted you to understand it? And it's really subjective. Whatever you feel, that's what's important. But when it comes to public art, and I thought that would be helpful, I thought it would be easy. I had no way of knowing how complicated it is. A lot of public art is done by groups that are very well financed, and they're not in neighborhoods of color. And I wanted to make sure that people that I deal with had a chance to be exposed to art for its own benefit. And it still is tough. 27 years moving forward, it still is very tough. But now we're focused very much in the land management because we're trying to showcase art on a larger scale. And we found that that worked. When we presented our exhibition, Harlem Sculpture Gardens, we did 20 sculptures that were contemporary, and they were also temporary as well. And then we have 5 pieces that were already permanent, that was uptown. People loved it. They wanted to picnic by it. They wanted to take pictures. They wanted to hang out. There was a gentleman who would bring his cello, and he would play by one particular installation. And when you're dealing with neighborhoods of color, there's these narratives that they have about us. They think we're not interested in culture, or we're not interested in fine arts, and that's not true. You gotta give people a chance. You gotta give them an opportunity. Now, how do you engage them, as you mentioned, Gregory? You have to connect how different aspects of it can work for people, like workforce development, job creation. We're working with street trees, and that is a job opportunity for people if they're interested in being an arborist, or they're interested in working for a landscape company. We started, training ourselves, and now we're training others how to deal with tree stewardship. That has nothing to do with what I like to say, a garbage bag and a broom, because oftentimes in communities of color, that's what they want to push us into. But there's more to stewardship than that. There's gardening, there's pruning, there's tree identification, there's birding, that's fun. All of those together work. And so I reached out to the local college, City College. They have a training program, and I wanted to get young people involved. But in order to do it, I needed to do it myself. So I have my OSHA and my SST, and I have 30 hours of carpentry, and I have 30 hours of basic electrical and drone piloting as well. When I talk to young people, they are looking at me differently now. When I talk to women, they're like, can I do that too? And so you got people looking at it differently. It's not somebody else's responsibility. We all can play a role. And I've always felt that the Parks Department of New York City cannot do it alone. It's too much land. It's too much work. And if we can engage more New Yorkers, we all can help in improving our public spaces and make them more fun. So that's why we got involved with all of this land management.
And can you talk a little bit about, you talk about land management, but yeah, absolutely.
I see the women are getting excited.
I'm excited too. I've never flown a drone. But how did what is the scope of the sort of green work that you're doing, and how did you migrate towards that work through the sculpture work?
Well, I've always been a gardener from a kid. I've always gardened, and so it comes from that experience of gardening. Me and my uncle used to garden all the time. That's why I like roses and hydrangeas. I think of him when I do that. But it's a part of public, space is part of public art. You want to make it attractive, but you got to deal with the conditions that you're dealing with. So we discovered soil erosion in St. Nicholas Park, flooding in Morningside Park, soil compaction in Jackie Robinson Park. How do we deal with those issues? How do we improve them? And so we formed a coalition of different people, Brotherhood, Sister Soul, New York Restoration Project, Broadway Mall Association, where we just come together and we talk. What do we see? What do we observe? So we can put them together and present to parks. In fact, we wish to present in the next couple of weeks some of the findings that we discovered, so therefore we all can work in tandem with each other. This is how you improve land management. This is how you get more art in the parks.
Amazing. Tamar, I think it'd be good for you, one of the projects that we highlighted in this district was the conversion of schoolyards to playgrounds, and maybe you can talk about what's happened already and then what's the future hold for that effort.
Great, thank you. And I just want to commend you on all those hours of training. And also just to emphasize that story that you tell about the importance of participation, right? And just really diving in. And so often we feel like I'm not good enough, I don't know enough, this isn't valuable enough. And one of the things that we do when we go into the schools is we work with the children around having them design the playgrounds. And it's an amazing experience for them because they're learning skills. They go into the playground and they measure the square footage of the playground with one of those little roller things. You probably know what it's called. I don't. And they work with a landscape architect to decide what are the different elements that they're going to put in the playground. And then they survey their peers. So they start doing participatory designing themselves. And they learn about budgeting because they don't have enough money in the budget to do everything that they want. So they need to make some hard choices. And what this does for the children is really give them a sense of civic responsibility. And so you talked about how working in the garden with your uncle has driven you to continue to take care of green spaces. And one of the hopes that we have around engaging children in participatory design for these schoolyards is that they continue their civic engagement in whatever area they choose, but that they see that they can actually have agency, that they can make a difference. And at one of the school openings that we had in June of last year, a 6th grader who had been a 5th grader at an elementary school came back especially for the school opening. It was actually in September. He came back for the school opening of the yard that he participated in, and he said, as a kid, things just kind of happen, and you don't really know how they come to pass. But this time, we were behind the scenes. We were the ones who got to decide. We were the ones who got to make it happen, and that was an amazing feeling. And so I just love that sense of participatory development. So we have 3 schools that we've built in Central Harlem. PS 154, which is on 126, between 7th and 8th Avenues. We have PS 180, which is near Manhattan Avenue. I can't see the cross street, 119th Street. And then PS 242, which is on 122nd Street in Lenox. And we're beginning the participatory design process at PS 92, which is on 135th, between 7th and 8th. So, a lot of investment in this neighborhood over the years, and a desire to really be part of transforming this opportunity, this environment, to bring in more nature and to work with communities. And we don't just work with the children, we work with the parents, we work with the teachers. The teachers are often the ones who get the most excited about it. And then often we work with the surrounding communities. In one of the schoolyards that we worked in, the school invited the senior center, which was right across the street, to be part of the design process. And so they were able to build benches that were better suited for older members and planting gardens that were raised so that they didn't have to bend down to do the planting. So some really beautiful inter-age collaboration.
And the goal of this, obviously, there's an improvement of the space itself, but there's a goal of access, that open spaces that are otherwise closed when they
Yeah.
don't necessarily need to be.
So thank you for that reminder.
Would you like to talk about that?
One of the things is that schoolyards are often fenced and they're often closed to the public. And one of the things that we require when we go into any school is to say, we will fund the transformation, we will fundraise around it, we will get public dollars for it, but in exchange, you have to open it to the public. And so the schoolyards that we work in are open after school and on the weekends for public use, so that kids and adults can play basketball or soccer or just go and hang out. We often have gazebos so that people have a shade structure to sit in. And it brings people who don't have a park within a 10-minute walk to their homes a space that is fully accessible, very close to home. And for those of you who have small children, you know that walking more than 10 minutes can be challenging with a toddler that doesn't want to quite go that far. And so having a place that's very near to home can make the difference between being inside and being outside.
One of the things that in our report and our conversations with the community board, and I think anybody can sort of talk to this a little bit, is access can be defined by that 10-minute walk, but there's also all sorts of other ways that folks can be getting to parks, one of them being safe bike lanes. I don't know if Gregory or anybody else wants to talk a little bit about that and the experience here.
The safe bike lanes are really important because we do have a lot of city bike that are set up on blocks. So there's really quick, very easy access, which actually does work. And also for people that are not capable of getting around, let's say by a bike or by walking, there's also public free transportation, just say for older adults who wants to go to the park, that they can get that as well. But one of the things that I actually did like that we did a few years ago with the senior center, we had an intergenerational initiative where we brought the younger adults to help us seniors understand planting, growing. I mean, they have done it before because they have lived, but you see it through a new pair of eyes when you engage with someone that's younger and help you to do that. So they were able to bring that to them, and it was amazing. It was a great result of having to learn how to plant new stuff, what are things that you look for in a park that may be safe, that maybe, that you should be aware of. One of the things that we never did ever have before until recently was dog runs within the Harlem district. I know I lived close to Morris Park and there wasn't one there, but people do have pets and they want to take their pets out, and that was a great thing for young adults to say, hey, if you want to take your dog to Morris Park or Marcus Garvey Park, there's a dog run there. And so that was opening up a whole new flow of information so that people can get out and kind of really grow and connect with other people. And another thing that does happen when you bike, you walk, or you have any transportation, you cultivate friendships. When you go to the park, you actually do. And so those were some of the things that we saw that really expand how we feel about the open spaces and green spaces that we'd like to have within our community.
Yeah, I'd like to just maybe offer some observations as to where this advocacy around parks has led our organization. We're beginning to look at transportation infrastructure as a source for activating and creating green space. The whole concept of transportation infrastructure has largely been one that tends to divide people and divide use. And we're very interested in trying to find ways to make that same infrastructure that was a source of division, where people can actually coexist. People, motorists, cyclists can coexist in harmony. So we've been identifying sites throughout our district, whether it's a street that is underutilized or lifeless, or street intersections where there's been advocacy around what's called daylighting intersections. Those areas can also become parklets where a bench and some trees can be installed to increase the tree canopy. And for me, the biggest thing was just ultimately changing personally my consciousness around how I perceived conventions of everyday life. The concept that you live across the street is actually a statement about division. We had a restaurant, there was just recently where a lot of the restaurants that were part of the Open Streets programs took down their infrastructure. And the immediate response to the removal of that infrastructure was, this will return to a parking space. And my position was and is, no, it returns to public space. And then we, the public, needs to decide what would be the best use for that space. So as much as my work is centered around parks, and I've been advocating for 6 green spaces that are along St. Nicholas Avenue, somehow that advocacy has moved me out into the street to think about how streets can be converted into spaces where our tree canopy can be increased, and where all three entities that use space, motorists, cyclists, and pedestrians, can coexist. And we've seen incredible examples at 42nd Street, down on Broadway, and over on 123rd Street as well.
I think the vision that you're talking about and the work that you're doing with the blending of culture and open space is sort of bleeding into 2 areas that are spoken about separately, but realizing that they're one brings me back to some of the work that the community board is doing around the idea of a master plan, of the idea to vision the entire district and have, they don't need to be super specific plans, but the idea that all of these things are brought together in a comprehensive look at what could be possible here in the district, including waterfronts, et cetera. And I'm wondering what, for each of you, is sort of the biggest challenge to getting where you want to be with the work that you're doing, and how people can get involved.
Well, I just want to share, I think perhaps we overplan things and we don't allow enough spontaneity. And I think you want to first get people interested. So if they're not interested, all this planning is for naught. So why don't we think about doing things that would bring joy to people's lives? Like, I want to organize a kite making workshop for people, because we're trying to start a fabrication studios. It's one thing to see something, see art, but it's another thing if you're engaged in making it. So if you're making it, now you have a whole different attitude. And if you could do something that's fun for yourself, for your children, it makes it a lot better. So why aren't we thinking about what are our interests? What's fun? What would make us happy? And I think we need to do that. And if you're saying that the open space is our backyard for which we could do it, then that's the best thing. So I feel that we need to stop over planning and just really allow people to get their hands a little dirty and do things. And we did that this year for ourselves. We fabricated 5 benches because we were trying to learn how to do it. And we interacted with other artists to learn different techniques like shoshujiban, which is the burning of the wood. And why would you do that? It's having this engagement that gives people ideas. So if somebody said, you know, I like that idea, maybe I'll think about this. What about milk paint and all these other things? So if we don't make things fun, if we don't make it accessible where people feel that they can do it, you know, and it's not just somebody else's responsibility, somebody else's job. You could do it too. This country is changing, and we're talking about manufacturing. We can't go back to the old days of large-scale manufacturing, but with small batch manufacturing, we can make maybe a bench or a chair or a table and tree guards and, you know, tree protectors, and we could do other things that protect our environment from the heavy rains and all the brush fires. We just need to, you know, have a little bit more fun and faith in each other, because I think we've lost a little bit of faith in each other too.
Fair enough. Gregory, what are you seeing as the need for your project?
Well,
I
I
mean, it's
probably, my position is that we can't do enough planning.
Okay.
And I think I say that with an understanding that we need to create plans that can grow legs, right? And can move into the spaces that these plans need to move into. And oftentimes, you know, working from a community-driven perspective, it's a real uphill battle to get your advocacy and your plans in front of the right people and in front of the decision makers. And so to some degree, I think for Harlem, we should be, and I want to thank you, Adam, for you know, coming to Harlem to do this event. But most of you may not know, or you may know, we had the first daffodil distribution site here at A. Philip Randolph, thanks to New Yorkers for Parks. So what we, as community-driven groups, we need to, as Toni Morrison put it, go outside the yard. We have to go outside of the boundaries of the community and seek out partnerships with people who are doing this work and bringing these organizations back into the community to help facilitate the movement of our agenda and our plans to people making decisions around parks. It takes a minute, right, to really build a relationship with the various agencies. It doesn't happen overnight. And sometimes you have to fight and apologize, but eventually you have to become a partner, and you have to be open to more partnerships beyond your imagination, just to get what you perceive and what you're talking about, your master plan, and all of these plans we have, to people that can actually make the decisions. Because without those partnerships, that content really doesn't ever grow the legs they need in order to make the difference we want those plans to make.
I tend to agree with that, and spanning administrations and changing leadership, it makes it very, very difficult. And often the thing that is the most consistent is the advocates and staying on.
Yeah, well, one of the things I'll say about shifting leadership, and there is a core central staff in the government that remains in place most of the time, and that's the heart and soul of the city. And those are where the most valuable relationships can be nurtured.
Are you going to call out Steve Simon again?
No, I'm not. But there's others in the room as well who have did this work and are in places. They live in the community, and they're in places and are at tables, and we need to be partnering with them to continue these efforts.
Great. Should we open it up to some questions? Are there any questions from the audience?
result of a recent trip to Europe, I'm just wondering, have you guys considered or looked at doing any green walls? I mean, they're really making tracks with that. And our community does an awesome job with the murals, but is there any consideration? Because that actually helps add a lot of green to a space and with our buildings. Is there anything, has there been any discussion or consideration of that?
Oh, you're asking me about murals? I don't do
No,
them
no,
here.
the green walls are literally walls that have
Vertical.
plants.
Like vertical
growing.
walls.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I was just wondering if this group has run across it, discussed it, or if that's even on the table at all.
That hasn't been discussed, but I do know what you're talking about. I know that they've been successful in other locations to bring green to spaces. The ideas that were outlined in the report are, for the most part, ideas that have either come from the community board itself or advocates like these who are vocal and have some traction for the work that they do. But it's not meant to be a limited number of ideas, just a beginning of a conversation.
Hi, I do have a question, but I also want to speak to what has been discussed already. I'm an alma mater of those two schools that you just mentioned, PS 242 and 180. I went to PS 242 from first grade to second grade, and then PS 180 from second grade to fifth grade. And so I'm coming back and I saw this meeting and I really wanted to show up and speak to how my own personal journey has been affected by these efforts, specifically the exposure to nature or natural elements, as well as the sparking of curiosity and natural playfulness that is accessible to us all should we have the exposure to it. And so something that both Gregory and Savon mentioned, I think they both are speaking to two sides of a similar coin. I think it's not one without the other, it's definitely both. The planning that plants the seed for the children that are going to experience it physically, intentionally, and presently, and how it affects them moving forward. So my question is, with both the planning and the additional curiosity and experience, the felt experience, with these projects that are being expressed, is it possible to kind of create some way where you include children's experience plus the planning in order to create like structures or playgrounds or, things that help support growth or psychological development or artistic development, things like that? I don't know if that was clear.
We already do that.
Oh, okay.
I just got a picture before we started of an installation in St. Nicholas Park that just finished, and
Okay.
it was fabricated by Beam Center and young people.
Mm-hmm.
They fabricated the whole piece. The artist had the design, they fabricated the work, everybody's excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have another piece that's going to come from LA that also young people built. We are trying to do more fabrication ourselves and make it about workforce development, not just for young people, but for adults too.
Yes.
And so therefore, people can see how certain skill sets cross industry.
Right.
Certain trades cross architecture, landscape, public art, and you'd be surprised what other, industries that these skill sets can cross. You do that and you have more under your belt, you have a better chance of getting a job and taking care of your family. And now your vocation is, what was a hobby now becomes your job and you're happy with it. So we are starting to do that. It all works together.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just respond as well. Youth leadership is something I'm very interested in, primarily because I'm a little tired and would love to see younger people do some of this work. When we were doing our community visioning for A. Philip Randolph Square, We did work with interns who were working at the borough president's office, and they helped with our community visioning survey, where we actually interacted with 400 or more residents in the community. Just of a personal note, he may not be here today, but one of my friends who is a partner in this A. Philip Randolph project brought his 2 daughters to our regular monthly meetings. And they were in middle school and I think elementary school at the time that we were advocating for this project. And now one of them is actually graduating high school and headed to college and is very interested in taking on some of the leadership around the stewardship of the park and our open streets initiative that we're presently working on. But I have a serious interest in attracting both youth and young professionals to this work. I think these types of projects are legacy projects. They require decades-long commitments that expand beyond most individuals' lifetime. So you need youth and young people involved to carry these visions forward.
Hi, just really quickly. Oops, sorry, I'm loud. This is all great, but I want to go to a point that Savona said, which is sometimes the people of the neighborhood, when it comes to stewardship, is seen more like a whole cleanup effort, and the people of a particular financial background are only seen as being no better than bookmen. And when we're all done with you cleaning up, then we're going to enjoy the situation. So have you guys been thinking through the entry points for those people, maybe not your working professional, but your regular Harlemite that cares about the community too, but when they do get to be engaged, are not welcomed? And when they're not in the room, are talked about like, those people don't keep things up, those people keep this place filthy, they don't care. That's not the case. But that attitude turns off many of the 80% AMI and below. So has anybody thought through entry points for your regular Harlemite who is going to suffer from living on a heat island, specifically here in Central Harlem, since we don't have a park and we're lacking green space? So I like what you're doing, Gregory, to bring more trees and stuff, but we also need to take care of what's here. But everyday people don't feel necessarily welcome in taking parts and stuff. And I bounce around and do a lot of things with different people, so it's not always a welcoming situation.
Anybody wants to jump in? Well, the only thing I can say is I had a great experience yesterday where we put up this very large piece, and the person who came to help the artist install immediately started to talk to people, and people were interested in having conversation, and I got to meet the son of Benta from Benta Funerals Home. And I said, did you remember Mr. Lance? And he said, oh yeah, I remember Mr. Lance. He used to be on 132nd Street. And I'm saying, you know what, maybe we should have more ambassadors around to just talk to people. You know, have conversation, get to know each other a little bit around something. It could be around a garden, it could be around a playground, it could be around a piece of art. But if we engage in conversation, you're building community where people start to care about one another. And I think that's important right now, that people need to care for each other, have respect for each other, one generation versus the other. I tend to think a lot of young adults don't know what their parents or the previous generation enjoy. So maybe if we have more opportunities to have conversations, it might be good.
So June, I'll respond to, I was hearing you. Oftentimes when I hear those narratives, they break my heart because I know them to be true. What I've learned to do is just walk around that, right? And one of the ways that we found we found a way to walk around some of that. When we were working at A. Philip Randolph, what we realized is that oftentimes people will come into a community and the first place they go for access to that community is the public space. And then the people's reception in that space, there's always some confusion, potential confusion, or potential contest of power. One of the things we decided to do was to look at St. Nicholas Avenue and try to organize fringe groups for all 6 of those green spaces that's dotted along St. Nicholas. So we're talking about Malcolm X Plaza, Marx Triangle, A. Philip Randolph Square, Harriet Tubman Memorial, Hancock Square, and Roosevelt Square. And we did it with a very deliberate purpose and intention. That is, that these sites would have a community group in place that could both welcome and absorb people wanting to do advocacy in the space. So that, in other words, it's a proactive approach of creating an environment where your inclusion is based on the fact that you created the space, right? Rather than coming into a space and not necessarily feeling welcome. Now, trying to codify that alliance has been difficult from a community perspective, from an agency perspective, because at the end of the day, it's public space, and you can have all kind of multiple entities at one space operating at the same time. But it was an effort on our part to acknowledge that this narrative exists, and this was the response we had to that experience.
Can I just add something? I think often we separate the creation process from the maintenance process, and that's a huge missed opportunity. And what we found, so my colleagues in other states and other countries have found that the parks that are created really hand in hand with the local community are the ones that are best maintained, because they've put in the sweat equity to create that space, and so they are 100% committed to keeping that space in good order. We have this beautiful park that was created with a Hispanic community in California that was it was a little 1-acre park that was mainly being used for drug exchange. And a group of women from that community got together and said, we want to reclaim this space. And so they started working with one of my colleagues there and really working out like what they wanted to see in the space, bringing other community members and co-creating, and eventually were able to build a space that was then used for a number of different purposes, including some mass distribution during COVID and other public health interventions, and just it became their space that they were able to enjoy.
I'm sorry, but I gotta bring up a little bit of a fact. This is America, and if you're a person of color, we don't get the same amount of money as other communities, and we're always told that we need to clean up first before we can get anything, and we'll get to the plantings and all the other good stuff later, but why don't you take care of that part? And I think people get offended by that. It's one thing to say you want to take ownership, but we don't get the same resources. We don't get our electeds to pay attention to what we're talking about, because it's not a bread and butter issue. They want to focus on housing and jobs and other things that deal with life and death, but this too has a lot to do with life and death. Your quality of life is important, and how do we get them to see that this is also about quality of life, you know? And I'm just saying, that sounds great about the maintenance thing, but we're always told to deal with that. And I just feel that it should be a mixed bag. Yes, a little maintenance, but also some good stuff so people can feel good about themselves, their community, and empowered. That's all.
Yeah, and I just want to just say that the main point of what I was saying is that they weren't just involved at the maintenance level, right? They were involved in the creation, in the visioning part. What was this park going to be looking like? What kinds of plants did they want? They were involved in the plantings. They were involved in the, I don't know if they were making the benches, but certainly involved in the types of benches that they would want there. And so very much to your point of, it wasn't just about like, oh, just come in at the end and pick up the garbage to make sure that it looks nice.
And I also feel that those conversations of even cultivating green spaces wasn't a priority in our community. Like you said, the bread and butter issue was. But now here we are, we're having these conversations where it's valuable to our health. It's healthy to have a green space for our children and for our community. And so what we need as a community is to prioritize those conversations and bring everybody along with it, because it benefits everyone. And I think that's one of the great starting point or basis point where we can start having those conversations, because it won't only benefit us, people of color, but it'll also benefit anybody else that's within our community. And why not have those conversations?
I agree.
Well, I'll add one thing to this conversation. And it took me a minute to come to terms with the fact that in most working class communities, or the communities of the working poor, and even to some degree middle class communities, most of this activity is financed through public investment. There's not a lot of activity around private investment, and that's an area that I think community groups, particularly in our district, we need to really begin to look beyond the government for assistance. There's all types of amazing projects that I'm hearing about from Mellon, from Bloomberg, and other entities. And let me just say, all of this stuff is daunting and frightening to pursue. These grant applications, just completing a 501c3 alone is a challenge. But it is something that we will need to do, and we need to find partners like New Yorkers for Park, the Trust for Public Land, that could possibly come in and do some trainings on how to access private investment to supplement the work we're doing here in the community.
So yes, I'm going to have to challenge your last statement, because when private dollars pay for something, the public no longer has control over it, right? So I appreciate what you've done at the start off with the Randolph Square. Actually, when I first came to the neighborhood back in the 90s, I'm born here in New York City, and that park actually had a sitting area where people barbecued that lived here. So that really was their park. It was green, okay? And right now, there's a lot of concrete. So I like your idea with the gazebo and your idea of the arts incorporated, but a lot of green space, because for a lot of people that live here, that is their park. So I understand that for many, you know, you have people that have a different lifestyle, but we don't have benches to sit there while we're even waiting for the bus, where before there was benches. There was people that actually barbecued there. Okay, so it really was, as tiny as it actually was a space with trees and whatever, and people partook in that. So I would like to see that kind of returned in a way. And as far as you commenting changing the green space, the area so it has more green space, if that means eliminating a lot of traffic moving, you have to also remember that there are people living here, okay? And they need the services of EMT, fire department, sanitation, all those things have to go on that same road that regular traffic has to move on. So this place can't only cater to tourism. I get 42nd Street, but this is not 42nd Street. This is Harlem. People live here, okay? So the two universes really have to take that first into account, that there are residents living here, okay, of all kinds, and mostly poor people, okay? Yes, working class people are poor. They're 5 seconds away from being just like a lot of those people that are not coming in here or somehow were not notified that this meeting is taking place.
Right.
And it's gonna change their neighborhood, okay? And it's not till after the fact. That's the reason why you have a lot of the hard work that you put into changing it getting destroyed because they weren't involved. And as far as announcing, hey, you could put a bulletin board, because I myself would love to do some of those benches, okay? I also am an artist and I love to build, okay? And I love greenness. So if there was a bulletin board out there saying, hey, you know, if you want to volunteer or even apprenticeship, because I'm broke, okay? And even if it's a stipend I'm getting, that would also be an incentive for people to say, hey, you know what? I'll come and help, and I'll make sure that it's fixed all the time. So thank you for listening.
Well, thank you for the bulletin board idea. Maybe that's possible. Yeah.
My concern, because a lot of things sort of, by the way, I'm Chet Wye. I did Harlem for Obama, Harlem for.
Sorry, it's better with the mic.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, folks. I'm Chet Wye. I did Harlem for Obama, Harlem for. Harlem for Obama started off with a couple hundred people. We grew into 2,700 people in this area. Came all the way from New York. But the makeup of the group, poor people, middle class people, rich people, all ethnicities, you know, sexual orientation, whatever, you know, coming together under the same roof, under this ethos that all we had to do was respect each other. If you couldn't respect, you needed to be on the other side of the door. And with that, collaboration, and in 2008, you know, this whole area transitioned into really getting into gentrification. But we didn't have the problems that some of the other areas did, because we had been working in a house on a broad scale. And the next thing you knew, people who had been walking past each other and just saying hello were calling each other by name, sitting out in the cafes, eating together. Next thing you knew, they were in each other's living rooms, no matter what the economic strata was. I would advise that a crucial component of this effort would be to embrace volunteerism from the start. All right? What you're going to find is that not only that you're going to have a lot of people converge when they're notified and they're part of this, that they will give that sweat equity. But there's also a lot of expertise that's out there that's not in this room. And the other thing is that we always have to be conscious and not be afraid to act like we don't know what we know. I want everybody to take a look around this room right here. What's the problem? We're in Central Harlem. What's the problem? We don't have Central Harlem in here in the way that we have everybody here. We need to be conscious of that in every aspect of this city, or it's not going to work. It's not a criticism. It's a method of building.
Any thoughts on that?
Respond to that?
Okay. Do we have one more question?
Sure, I do. I just want to thank all of you for the work you're doing. And, you know, here in Harlem, we really need you all to succeed. I was happy to hear that bike lanes were part of this conversation earlier. And I think, you know, I'm a father. I live on 124th. And, you know, we go to the parks all the time. Like, even before COVID, I have young children. And the parks that we can't walk to are really inaccessible to us. You know, the bus service isn't great. I'm not going to drive there. And having protected bike lanes, which don't exist in Community Board 10. I mean, there's the one on 5th that connects Central Park to Mount Morris. But that's on the border. That's not really in Central Harlem. It really limits my ability as a father to get my kids to get their hands dirty. You know, we're part of a community garden on 123rd, but you know, that's the extent of it. We can't get down to Central Park. We can't get to all these amazing parks that you've identified on your graphic here. So I just want to encourage you to think about protected bike lanes in all the work you do. And you know, I hope someday I can ride around Harlem with my kids and see the art installations, go down St. Nick as a green district, have the master plan come to fruition, and check out the playgrounds that you guys are renovating. So thank you.
Thanks so much for the comment. I think one of the things that I'll mention is that you know, in each of the reports that we're doing in each of the 5 districts, hearing directly from the parks committees talking about bike lanes as an access question to parks, that's been a shift. We used to only hear about bike lanes in sort of transportation-focused conversations. So like there's, you know, the last 20 years, there's been a big change. Obviously, a lot more that can be done. But particularly in areas in Brooklyn and in Harlem, having it possible to get to bigger parks that may not be very close to you, but getting there safely with a bike is really a priority for a lot of people. So it's definitely on our radar. And we work a fair amount, New Yorkers for Parks does, with transportation alternatives on that same issue.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question, I think. And then
I just want to respond quickly to
yeah.
the bike lane issue. I'm aware of the advocacy around the 7th Avenue, the Powell Boulevard bike lane. And my suggestion was to think a little bit more broadly, not about just the bike lane, but to think about what's the relationship to the bike lane, to the actual median there. And hopefully I'm going to get a meeting with Ruth McDaniels and Mr. Love over here, because I think there might be a way for the 2 initiatives to work together in a complementary fashion, whereby the agency might be able to address the problem by bringing these 2 issues together. So we'll see what happens with that advocacy.
Sorry, I got a little distracted. My name is Keisha Sutton-James. Hi, friends and neighbors. I live across the street directly, right there. But I'm also Deputy Manhattan Borough President. Hi, everybody. I've been there since, I grew up in Harlem on 135th Street, but I've been across the street since 2004. And I just want to commend all of you, but starting with Gregory, who I've been with on this journey around A. Philip Randolph Park. I would just want to commend you and thank you for your leadership and the work, but also the broadening of your work and the broadening of your thinking and what you're bringing, frankly, to the community. I want to thank all of you for your service and for bringing this amazing gathering. Oh, hey, Jamie, I didn't see you over there. I see a lot of friends and familiar faces, but just wanted to say thank you for putting this together, and I look forward to, you know, being engaged in further conversations about what we can do to create more green space in Central Harlem. Very keen. And I will say, I didn't start needing green space in COVID. I've always known that I need nature in my life and for my own, sanity and my own mental health. So I'm very kind of keen on this work. Just have to figure out how we get it done, and I thank you all.
Well, can we give a nice round of applause to the panelists here? And thank you, everybody, for coming out. Again, we're from New Yorkers for Parks. I think one of the things I really want to emphasize in addition to all of this work is get involved in the current process for establishing the budget for next fiscal year. You can go to our website, sign petitions to get more funding for your city's parks. It's a really important time. That's our focus for the next 6 months, but we'll be working closely with folks at this table on the future. Thanks so much.
Thank you.